We'll start with the 5-day self-isolation period. I think the Americans announced this 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It's been under active consideration here. What difference will it make?
It'll make a lot of difference for the people who would normally be quarantining for 10 days. Obviously reduces it. But what difference does it actually make to the transmission of the virus? I imagine if it was cut completely, I don't think it would make an awful lot of difference, because the virus trajectory of the wave is really clearly on its way down now. And we know that this virus is very, very infectious. I've seen cases of it within my own building here and my own club and around where I live. And whatever anyone's done, it hasn't prevented them getting infected. But fortunately, all the infections to date are completely mild. So that's been a very good thing. And so I think that the more people exposed to this, the better the sort of herd protection is, i.e. the majority of the population is being exposed to this now. I think that will be a very good immunity. So I just think it'll go 5 days now, then perhaps 3, 2. We know that some people are still positive at 5 days, but they're very unlikely to be significantly infectious. And if they are, then whoever they've been around, I don't think it would make that much difference whether it's 5 days or 3 days or whatever.
Professor, can we just talk a little bit about modelling? I mean, I think it's probably fair to assume, and tell me if you disagree, that the modelling exaggerated the danger posed by Omicron. Do we need to find a way as a society, as a polity, to introduce some moral hazard to forecasting? Because it will seem to many people at the moment that obviously we can understand why the precautionary principle applies and that the modellers look at the worst case scenario. We want to be prudent. They don't want to be found out later as having not taken enough action to stop a major outbreak. The problem with that, of course, is that when you squeeze down, when you go for these lockdown-like measures, we get all these knock-on effects which seem rarely to be taken into account of. Waiting lists, educational problems, etc., etc.
Yes, I do think that one of the greatest mistakes of this pandemic was to rely on the modelling that took into no account the knock-on effect. We now know, I think I predicted right at the beginning when lockdown came in on 23rd of March 2020, remember it very well, that a knock-on effect on other diseases and people's health, etc., plus the mental strain of lockdown and the economic knock-on effects would probably be worse than the lockdown itself. And I think it's fair enough to say now that there's enough evidence out there to suggest that that's completely correct, that lockdown probably achieved very little because the incident rate was falling for about 4 days and continued when lockdown came in. So had we not introduced lockdown, I don't think it would have made very much difference. But what we do know is the number of people who miss screening for cancer, heart disease, and the impact on mental health and on the young people's life has been horrendous. And that's why I was so delighted that they didn't the Prime Minister resisted attempts by others very close to him to put a lockdown before Christmas. That would have put people over the edge somewhat terrible. And I do think that in future, any kind of modelling has to look at the knock-on effect. The law of unintended consequences comes in roaring with this this type of approach to the disease. I would say, though, at the beginning, at that time, we weren't quite sure how dreadful the disease was going to be or not. And we were very obviously fearful of what we were seeing from Italy. But the fact that the actual raw data was showing that it was coming down, I think I would never want to see this again, and neither would many other people. I think we've got to treat it more as a virus, and that's the other thing that was not encouraged. It should have right at the beginning. This is a virus that gave the upper respiratory tract symptoms with a pneumonia. We know how to deal with that if we don't know the agent, and this was actively discouraged, and that's something we should never ever do again. You basically should allow doctors to do the maximum treatment for their patients, whatever they think is best. And that was, amazed that that was actively discouraged, looking back at it retrospectively.
Well, we hope in the fullness of time, the public inquiry, it all comes out in the wash. But as I say, that question of moral hazard, maybe it's one we'll return to.